Yeah. Look.
Will Chandler, former COO of Camp Grizzly, also a badass founder now. That's my introduction. That's as good as you get. You've become a friend. You're a mass hole. You have crystals all around you at 8,000 feet. But
dude. I'm from New Hampshire. I just want to, for the record, I'm from New Hampshire. I'm not from Massachusetts. Massive.
That's right.
Massive difference.
Massive difference. That's how you were introduced. How my lawyer introduced us and told me that I would like you. It was like, yeah, dude, you're gonna like Will. He's kind of a masshole like you. And I'm like, I'm from Oregon. Like, he's from New Hampshire. And it's like, yeah, but you got the same attitude.
You have masshole energy. Yeah.
Exactly.
All right, man. Well, here we are.
Yeah, to the point, right? It's always funny because, our talks, any of these talks always get started with like really great conversation. And then you get the formalization of hitting record and it's like, it turns stagnant and sterile, but okay. We'll avoid that. But to the point, what we were discussing about was, we're doing this creative mornings conversation on the future of creativity with a friend, Sarah at Nike, who's, had a brand digital narrative. And we have 559 people attending already. And that's like, we still have days to go, but it's just, I think a lot of people are very, very interested in the creative world of like, what is happening?
Right.
And you have been at the nexus of this, having run production firms, then being the COO and executive producer at like a pretty big name in the ad and creative world at Camp.
Yep.
And, let's just dive into it, man. Like, what do you think? Where do you think this world of like professional creativity, agency, brand, where do you think it's going?
Where do I think it's going? Man, I would say, well, it's a tumultuous time, right? As we all know, a lot of flex, a lot of change, rapid change. I mean, it feels like things are, at Camp, we did a lot of the live experience stuff. And I think people, in my opinion, they're growing a little weary of being in the matrix of Zoom and online and email and Slack and all these things all day long. And so it's like the Newtonian law of, equal and opposite reaction, right? It's like you're in the Zoom world all day, particularly for 4 years over COVID, people were just living in it, right? And so the reaction to that seems to be, I want to get outside the rectangle and do anything that's not me staring at a screen. I think people are tired of working all day, then they pick up their phone or they turn on their TV. There just seems to be a weariness to that, right? Like people are tired of it. So, I think we are seeing a big uptick in live events, experiences, et cetera, brands funding these things. We were at Camp, I joined in 2015. And the first job I did there was an activation. I'd never done an activation, right? I came from content production. And once I did one, I was kind of like, oh shit, this feels like this is the thing, right? Because you're engaging people. It's so much more engaging to be there in person than watch a banner ad or an ad on TV or what have you, So like, you're immersing people in the world of this brand, but there's other ways, you can immerse people in other worlds. It doesn't have to be brand funded, but since we're talking about sort of ad world, right? Like you see, I think you see more and more, medium to large brands jumping into this space and trying to just every month on the calendar, we're in person somewhere, right? And a lot of them are piggybacking off of pre-existing events, like US Open tennis, right? Like Super Bowl, was huge this year in Vegas. You had, as a consumer, you just didn't have the game. You had, back in the day, it was Super Bowl and then exclusive access parties. And now it's like Super Bowl.
VIP
and you have, as a consumer, you have a slate of 50 brand activations you could go to. So,
I always relate it kind of to food. Like if this is relevant, like you can talk about the food all day, but you still need to sink your teeth in at some point.
Right.
And the last 4 years seem to take away, like it did something to people's minds where they totally forgot that the IRL, the in real life aspect of actually experiencing the thing is the most important part of the product.
For sure. And I think, people want to have fun. Turning these events not just into like, a bar with 60 logos in it for brand X. It's like, no, people want that. You need to go a layer deeper than that and actually engage them with, whether that's some kind of game or, whatever. You need to engage people in real life so they're using their human brains.
Absolutely. What do you think what do you think that's doing to the people that are working? Like, I mean, you were running these teams, building these events for consumers. I think it's a perfect piggyback for the consumer, for like us, right? For the people that are masochistically attached to building these things and the creative execution. Like, what do you think is happening with the agency workers? Like, what does their environment look like?
Well, I mean, I think what's happening is, it's a pressure cooker, right? Because while brands want to get out and do these IRL things, they're not cheap, because you're buying physical product to actually fabricate whatever you're fabricating. Whether it's a giant swoosh or, some kind of walkthrough experience, right? You have to actually buy physical product. None of that is getting cheaper. Although, and we're seeing budgets come down from brands to a degree, right? They want to spend the same they were spending in 2019 and get more output. And you're just sitting here going, well, literal material costs are more. So how do we square that? And now, okay, you want to do something every month. So now like the actual, we have a $5 million activation budget for monthly activations. Now that's getting cut into 12 pieces. Where before it might have been, maybe it was one a quarter, pre 2020. And then obviously 2020 to 2022, it sort of dissipated a little, contracted. And now it's, I think it's growing again, but it's tough. I mean, I think project managers, account managers, creatives, people are being, there's like a pressure that's being created by these market forces, these economic market forces of, brands want to spend, again, the same as pre-2020, get higher output while the cost of everything has gone up, including salaries, right? Salaries have had to adjust to account for inflation and, cost of living and all this stuff. So, it does feel like there's going to be a bit of a reckoning moment where, just on a macro level, like agencies and brands are going to kind of have to come to the table and figure out like, okay, we can't have creatives working 70, 80-hour weeks for 52 weeks a year, like our teams can't do that.
Do you think that this is just the natural kind of, for those who haven't been in it as long, right? There is a natural cycle that happens with brands and agencies where it's like brands have this fall in love with the ad game, whatever it is, in real life, broadcast shifted to digital, et cetera, right? The new medium of the day. A new agency comes along that executes and like the money is put and there's like bigger budgets it's put into those. And then there's this idea that because they now know this, they're going to bring everything in-house or shift product right to DTC. We saw Nike go through its ebbs and flows and hopefully correcting that path recently.
Right.
And then realize, one, they can't afford it with in-house talent.
Right.
They can't get the same economies of scale on the production. And frankly, they get people that are myopic and lost in their own sauce and always having, shout out Gucci Mane for randomly quoting him there. But, but they end up realizing the power of a third party bringing exterior ideas on the polls. This just goes, it just goes up and down in like 2, 5 year, 10-year trends. Do you think that that's just what we're going through is another, kind of ebb or valley? Or do you think that there's something new happening with technology and post-COVID stuff?
Yeah. I don't see as many brands actually trying to bring teams in-house this time, right? On this cycle. You would think that would be the cycle. Like, hey, let's bring everyone in-house. I do think there's, a realization that you end up talking into the mirror, right? After a couple of years, it doesn't matter how good you are as a creative or a producer or what have you, you end up drinking the Kool-Aid and, you get so myopic that, you're just at this level where no consumer really gives a shit about what you're talking about at some point, right? And you're like, and then you're speaking to yourselves and then, what are you selling? And agencies run into that problem too, right? You get a big client and then, you have to rotate teams in and out of
Yep.
that client, because that's just the natural cycle of things. But
It's stale.
I personally don't see a lot of brands going, okay, let's bring everything in house now, like they did, I guess, kind of like 2010-ish. And then they realized, oh, we got to go back out of house to get this perspective. I do think technology, obviously AI, we could talk endlessly about that. Like where's that going?
Yeah.
Is it fulfilling its promise, at this point?
No. Let's pause here real quick, because one of the things that I was going to ask, and it leads into that, is, and we're talking about it on Thursday in Creative Mornings, is optimization versus creativity, and creativity is originality, right? And the role of people is much the same as automation mechanisms, be it AI or anything else, which is like, where do you fall in the cycle of this creativity moment? Houses like camp, right? Things that you've done largely have been at the origination point, right? You are developing great ideas, great experiences, great executions, right? That are meant to be provocative, right? Or experiential. Some, frankly, a lot of agencies fall into, even creatives and teams, into the like, hey, let's just convert as many people as possible right off the bat. And I think this is one of the big differentiations that we're going to try to make on Thursday, which is, what is the difference of the role of creative and agency person in that timeline of like coming up with the original creative provocative idea and optimizing that mechanism over time. And like what you're describing for teams very much is that, right? Like, you put the initial agency team on, they have new ideas, and then you have to switch it out to be creative. But how many people are in that optimization side? Do you see a differentiation, or?
You mean optimizing for things like data collection, conversion, et cetera, or like?
Yeah, when a client comes to you and they say, hey, there's a difference between, we're launching a new shoe and we need to sell more Air Force Ones,
Sure. I mean, to be honest, at camp, we were really more in what we did was, brands had a product, had a campaign, et cetera. And our mission or whatever from the brand would be to, create a moment that gets a ton of heat online, right? Or in real life, whatever. So, our metric was really like, do people have a good time? I mean, it was, we weren't doing a lot of the conversion stuff. I mean, as far as having to prove that out, because it was more like, let's do something. Yeah, again, you come to camp to go like, let's do something dope, hyper creative, and just amazing, and blow the lid off of this thing. And we'll let our other, agency partners worry about conversion online. And we honestly, we didn't collect a lot of data and analytics. And to be honest, I think that allowed camp, and there's a few other agencies and production companies out there like this, to not be constrained by that idea of, okay, we're going to do this huge thing, but we have to convert, like we have to optimize, we have to, I mean, we collected data, but it wasn't necessarily a KPI, because we weren't really doing a campaign. It was like, create a moment that gets picked up by, Hypebeast, Complex, all the, industry. This is for Adidas specifically, but like for all these industry people, you know what I mean? Or go to Apple, go to Comic-Con and win Comic-Con. How do we do that? And like, the year we did that for Apple, we blew the lid off of that place with our Severance activation. You know what I mean? So,
I remember that. That was, if anybody's ever seen that show, it's a tormenting kind of view into the office space. And I remember the activation, but this is
anyway.
So this is the point, right?
So I don't know that I could answer the optimization side of it. However, I do think, again, on like a larger level, looking at this, I mean, my feeling is everyone is so in data. It's like this, all that matters is data conversion. It's like, we kind of operated, and I personally prefer to operate on, well, why don't we just make something that where we get a lot of earned media eyeballs, people are posting and they're talking about this. There's a buzz that's created around this thing, right? Because that's going to turn into conversions. Is it like directly trackable when you do an IRL experience, unless, whatever, but I mean, I think you see my point, right? It's like,
yeah, no. This is exactly honestly where I land. Maybe this is us being, enjoying each other's company and conversation. But I think there's two things that I want to pull out of this, right? That and focus on is there's one, knowing your place within the system is very important.
mhm,
Right? Because I personally have been there, but I've also noticed creatives that have like go into a marketing kind of LTV conversion shop. Like your point is to bifurcate,
yeah,
the syntax of a word and then get it to convert slightly, like Amazon style creative,
yeah,
right?
yeah,
Is this button blue? Is the bevel core, which converts more and optimized for
right,
that in the DTC world? And I think that that's where particularly the technology world gets very obsessed because they can measure it. They over index on the
mhm,
measurement. And then on the other side of the spectrum, there's word of mouth is the single greatest metric you can get. It's very hard to measure, so people try to detract from it.
yeah,
But when they experience it,
yeah,
there's nothing that replaces it. And so you're like, yeah, when I go to the Audi, the basketball activation down in LA that I know Camp did, that
yeah,
was insane,
yeah,
right? That was just like, and you just talk about it because it was cool, and that's what it is, and then it leads to everything else. You got to figure out where you place yourself in the system,
mhm,
right? Because if you end up at the shop that's doing conversion, that's what you're going to do, and you got to know that role and perform into that role.
yeah,
Second is kind of on that, right? Which is getting obsessed with the numbers and the measures over the execution and the intent. And that's, again, you can build a great, amazing online brand about food and it might have an initial pop. But
mhm,
if you're selling cupcakes and the cupcake tastes like shit, well, that's going to be the end all experience, right? So you have to make
yeah,
that product there. And when people get obsessed with measures over execution or the actual product at the end of the day, they're, I think, doing a disservice to the entire chain because they end up working together.
mm,
And this is the point that we're making, is that it's not one or the other. We need to stop looking at this polarization of like one is best, one is worst. And
mm,
it's no, let's shift our thinking to, you have to have a great product and you have to launch that, make it remarkable, and then refine and use these tools of
mhm,
optimization later. But
yeah,
you have to continually refresh it, like you're saying, with new ideas and new products and new experiences. Otherwise, you're going to lose out on people that are looking for that next one.
yeah. Well, I mean, yeah, I think you could see that with, I mean, brands like, Nike and Adidas, right? It's like
Yeah.
I think both of those brands in the last, 8 years kind of forgot about the brand piece of it.
Yeah.
And you have to keep reflecting that brand and keeping it in people, not only in people's minds, but it always has to be the next cool thing, the next word of mouth thing.
Yeah.
Like, I saw this, I went to this Nike thing, this Adidas, whatever, we're using these because we're from Portland and it's,
Yeah.
largely people I've worked with, but like two notable brands, where
Yeah.
you've seen these big like valleys, and peaks and
Yeah.
valleys even in the last 10 years. So I think if you forget about, you have a great product, you forget about brand, and then you just go online and you go, okay, we're gonna, tune the dials here. It's like, well, you the middle part is like that launch piece, and the heat you still have to keep on the brand, so people go,
Yeah.
oh, this is still cool, this is still relevant, I still want to wear or purchase or whatever these things, right?
Yeah. Well, and that's
And
what it's so, I
data,
mean,
you can go to consumers and say, look at this data we collected. It's like, who gives a shit? It's
dude,
like,
we're in the middle of doing this with Everyday, right? Because we're
yeah,
fundamentally reimagining the digital work experience. That's
mhm,
our whole thing. Our new categorization is organized work environments,
right,
right? Which is so stale when you sound about it. But for us, because we come from the creative world, we know people that are crunched across all these apps. We're trying to build it so that it's just more intuitive and more about how you create and build in the digital world. Great, but we're going to have to stay fresh on all the new technologies, on all the new applications, on
mhm,
all the new experiences that our ICP is doing to make their lives better and then do remarkable things. You, right, are now in the point of capitalizing on it and taking experiences, right? Taking that experience element and building it. The thing that we're coming up against, why we were doing like a totally, limited closed launch right now because we're working out all the bugs, like a run through of a physical space that is so much easier. You can taste the cupcake, you can walk through the environment. We need to do that digitally. And so, where we are is like just getting the download to be seamless because we had to get, Apple cert approval and all of this so people do it seamlessly. And if you run into that initial friction, unless you're hand holding people, it's very, very hard to get through. So luckily we've done that and we're still getting positive reactions. But our next 8 days, 2 weeks is making it so seamless to get into that you can explore this cool new world, right? You're actually taking the lessons you learned from how amazing, how much like absolute desire there is for people to just have in real life experiences and seeing it and knowing it. And you're launching a whole new thing, which I want to know because I've experienced it. I want to know Will's transition from, hey, I'm doing this thing, I'm doing this career to like, I need to start this new venture because I'm obsessed with it. I'm just stoked, man, because I think everything that you're going to announce later is I think it's needed. I think it's going to be unreal. It's going to be real, but also unreal.
It's going to be very real and very surreal.
We're going to figure out how to get every day in there.
We'll get it in there. We'll work at. No, I mean, I think, I could tell you, part of the story, I did 9 years at camp. It was amazing. Before that, I was a freelancer, I had another production company, but it was freelance before that. And I just felt, okay, I think it's very important to take a break, like take time. I know it's not always the most affordable or feasible thing, but, I've had a couple months off now and it's from the everyday grind. I mean, I'm still working on stuff. But it's not like, oh, I have to have Zoom meetings from 9 to 5, in my calendar scheduled. And I think especially right now where people have been living kind of in the digital portal, working for me, it's just expanded, it's allowed me to explore different things, expanded my thinking on our industry, on other industries. How do I take pieces of those industries that I'm reading about and kind of bring them into whatever my next thing is? Yeah. And I think it's, you think, oh, my head's not in the sand, right? I'm on this full-time salary job. I'm seeing the landscape, but then you kind of get out of it and, 4 or 6 weeks passes and you're like, whoa, holy shit. It's like you actually lift your head up and look around. We've talked about this, as well in other conversations, but I think that's allowed me to really just retool my perspective on a lot of stuff. You know what I mean? And have the space to think about things like, how is AI affecting our business? How is it going to affect our business? Whatever I do next, how do I want to build that in this new environment? Because, the environment we're living in is rapidly changing. Yeah. And, I think every day's mission of streamlining and bringing all these things into one unified space is, that is one of the next things, because how many, it's so funny. I was on LinkedIn poking around a little bit and I saw this, people now are making these lists. Okay. If you're a new founder, here are my top technologies. No joke. One dude had like 32. I'm like, what the hell are we doing? The switching and just, the payments, the switching, the whatever. Okay, I have to learn how to use this new environment, Slack, payment, blah, blah, blah. It's like, we all need this in one place so we can keep doing. And I think, that's what technology's always done, right? It's always kind of compressed things into, right? Like, everyone before Google Maps had a paper map and you had like 40 paper maps floating around your car. Well, now it's in this thing, and you just put it up and you go. So I think every day and other new technologies, this is like the natural progression of kind of consolidating and streamlining so that the human beings who are operating these tools can do more.
Yeah. Dude, well put. I'm going to highlight that clip, by the way, and push that out. But no, it's extremely well put. And my favorite part about that, which I couldn't agree more with, and I think that our audience couldn't agree more with, but there's a tendency in our capital or our category to get confused, is the humans operating the tools, right? Is front and center at this. And again, back to even the creative mornings aspect, you hear the future of creative, like workload and AI, and the natural tendency, I think, for so many people is to just poo-poo the idea of AI. Oh, it'll never do it. It's like, no, I made a little timeline for our presentation that is like camera obscura. Guess what? Da Vinci used it, and it's like, photo, film,
Yeah.
digitization, so on
Yeah.
and so forth. The printing press, whatever it is, right? Most people don't know that the first books printed on the printing press were about witches
Mm.
and like hunting down witches. It wasn't
Yeah.
the Bible. It
Right.
was, it was other stuff. But the large point being there's a natural tendency to be afraid of these things. And
Mhm.
then there's the ability to embrace and realize it opens up, new paths, new ecosystems. Now, technology is a whole different world, but it's one nonetheless that is at the hands of the humans executing it. And it's our job to embrace it in its certain ways. With that said, it's not the idea that it's just going to absolutely replace people, or that the generative, not the generative, the general AI is going to replace everybody with a sentient being soon. I think is one, a lot of pipe dreams, and two is a magic hand wave without consideration to cost, energy, other market factors that go
Oh yeah.
into it. But regardless, we have to be at a place where we're augmenting how people do their creative tasks, their work, that go about that human experience.
Yeah.
And that's just, I mean, yeah, we have to build it for a digital world, but that physical world of how we just explore it and how we interact and blend the two is ultimately the sweet spot that we have to land in, right? We
Yeah.
have to plan for it.
Well, I mean, if you were old enough to be around in the '90s when the internet was, flourishing, or starting to flourish, I mean, there was a lot of the same
Yeah.
fears, critiques, et cetera, right? Like, this is going to replace people, and I mean, just in general, it was. I mean, AI is I mean, to me, AI is the next iteration of that, and it's I think the fear always gets to 100, and then the poo-pooers are to 0. You end up at like a 40 or 50. You know what I mean?
You know what I was thinking about, right? As somebody who, shout out Pratt Institute, I was right on the cusp of where before I got into digitizing type layouts,
Mm,
I was hand doing
right.
typography for science. And I'm like, okay, that's fine. But I can't, like, replicating this at scale is such a
Mm,
process. And it was like, and I had teachers who still remember in like the old, Madison Avenue ad worlds would like physically cut out
mm.
images to lay out for ads in print, right?
I did
You're
that in
like,
my high school newspaper. Our layouts were wax cut out.
yeah,
We like print them out, run through a wax machine, and lay them out on
yeah.
whatever, and it's like we've obviously come a long way, but
No, we've
but
come a
it's
long way. But this,
simplified.
this
It's
is my
become
point.
simplified. You know.
It's just convenience, man. Like, most people get distracted. It's like, is it more convenient or less convenient to do the task at hand? And it's like, I know very few people, I think, that get into the discussion these days about, is it replacing, don't use it, also exist post
Mhm.
digitization of these
Right.
manual things. And there were people then that were like, don't do it.
Right.
It takes the love and the craft. And it's like, well, you develop a different love and a
Yeah.
different craft, and it changes. And if we can do anything here, it's like an exercise on, we're doing this in creative mornings, right? Like, yeah, sure, write a brand tag with your AI, develop an image. Is it
Sure.
good? No. Is it convenient to rapidly prototype something? Sure.
Yeah.
And do you have a litany of digital ecosystems that it can distribute it to rapidly? Yes.
Right.
So, does that leave you more time to critically think and develop better and better ways to engage, and better ways to create and manifest that creativity?
Yeah.
If you
I
do
mean,
it right.
yeah, I think that goes to a bigger point that I've been thinking about, where I mean, humanity is immensely creative, right? And
Yeah.
it does feel like the internet, whatever. Really, I mean, really, it's like 2000. The internet comes online, everyone starts using it. We start working in it. The iPhone, 2006 or seven or whatever. I mean, these technologies are not that old, and yet we have this, to use that word again, myopic focus. It's like, what happened in the last 5 years, 10 years, and it's like, well, broaden your view out a little bit and think about, I mean, how long did it take the car to get dialed in and usable and all these
Yeah.
things? I mean, it does feel a little bit like, the internet as it still exists now, just as this, amorphous internet thing. It's like the spaghetti on the wall moment. And, we've
Yeah.
all, I mean, how many logins do we have to apps, not just for work, but for life? It's like, it does feel like we're in this moment of it's kind of messy, right? When you think about it, it's not, it's getting more streamlined, right? Like you can now save your passwords in your browser and, all these things where before I literally used to write them down or, it's crazy. But, I don't know. I mean, this is probably an oversimplification of thinking about AI, but maybe it's useful where it's like, there was DOS and then a lot of people didn't use it because it was hard to use and you had to prompt it. And then we had Windows, which essentially just skinned, a UI.
Yeah, you had the GUI, the graphic user interface.
Right. So we create this UI and then it's like, boom, like we're off to the races. And to a degree, it does feel like AI, I mean, you're talking, it's supercomputing, right? And it's almost like it's almost the UI to supercomputing where these things can assemble, I mean, I was like, hey, type me a company handbook for a small ad agency, and it's, right. It comes out with all this stuff. You still have to go in and tweak it, but that has saved like me an immense amount of time if I were to use that, and so I can take that time back and go on to other creative endeavors or what have you, you know what I mean? And so it in the not fearing AI sort of like pro column, it does feel like this idea of AI, I mean, it's the UI to like the supercomputing backend, right?
Yeah.
Because we hear about, we have to have these crazy chips for AI. It's like, well, it's really just, it's the supercomputing kind of user interface anyway,
Yeah. No. But I think you brought up one of the most valid points that there is about saving yourself time on other aspects. One, we're trying to communicate the importance of process and learning, right? What it's like to run an agency. So you can say, write a small handbook, a HR handbook or whatever for an agency, and then you can root through each step and, cross-reference that with your own experience, right? Your career and say, this is right. This is not right. This is right. This is not right. You're using critical thinking, right? Basically.
For sure. Yeah.
And what we need to encourage people to do now, right? When something can be just generated with confidence and speak, oh, look at this list. Well, on one hand, you need to learn how to go through that list and decide, is this actually correct? And is this correct for me? And you need to talk with other people or source other references. This is like anything we've ever done. You don't just read the book and take it as fact.
Right.
You say, hey, is this Facebook post about this thing real? Or am I just grabbing the attention and reacting? Great.
Right.
Do the same thing. And then lastly, and this is I think the most important point, is poor execution on a great strategy is still poor. So it could go through and automate an entire digital world of, 0 to 1 and build something great. What happens after?
Yeah.
You have to execute. And so great, you might have a great plan. I have worked with so many people that have such great ideas for new businesses, but they can't execute.
Right.
And so nothing happens. So great. You can automate ideas. You can automate some aspects of you can generate aspects of knowledge work. You can generate images. You can generate a movie. Doesn't mean the movie's good.
Right.
Doesn't mean the image is good. Right.
Yeah.
And that's where the person, the human, is so much more important in a world of proliferated AI, especially generative AI, because they have to be that kind of decision point to say, is this worth it? Is this not? Is this valid? Is this not? Can we make this happen?
Yeah, it becomes more of a managerial position than a, micro level not creating, but just doing, right?
Yeah. I mean, I think it just shifts it more, right? I always got, back in the creative director days, I would always get frustrated at curators, people that are really good at assembling other people's work and saying, look, I have taste, but didn't know how to like turn that into directing creative and really turning it into action. They were just good at like creating Pinterest boards, and suddenly they were creative directors, And what I realized was, one, we've shifted into largely a world of curators, people that know how to gather other images and other pictures and do these like very superficial topics. It's created a new economy, man, called the creator economy largely. But then you have these insane talents that have found themselves in that world that create original work inside of these new mediums. and just know how to use them. And they have, again, created entirely new industries.
Yeah.
And that's where I think that we're going to go, where the next evolution is. And I have no idea what it looks like, but you're going to create a level of automation similar to the curation space where you have new economies built on, but it's not going to erase the fundamental mechanisms of work that still need to happen every day. Right.
Yeah.
Drop mic. That's the end. That's the future of AI, man. That's it.
Yeah. I think that's the idea of, like, is it 100% takeover? Is it 0% take? No, it's probably 30 to 40% takeover of these menial thing, or the first stage of generation of something like, a campaign or a brief or, legal documents or what have you. You know what I mean? And and right, like the dynamic thinking of the human who's using these tools. You have to be more of like a dynamic curator than necessarily originating 20 pages of the agency manual, right?
Yeah.
So
exactly.
You're going in and doing more of the tweaking rather than the, because in that first run, for example, if I hadn't done that, I would go to an attorney and pay $5,000 for a manual or whatever, or I would spend time just cutting and pasting pieces of other company handbooks. Yeah. Well, it's like, what's the difference? I just used a supercomputer to do this for me. Great. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah, it's great. No, it's wonderful, man. And like, as somebody who's been a small business owner and, in the startup life, there's so many aspects of this that people have carved out niches for, and kind of, tried to wall up their little garden. Legal's a big one. And I have tremendous respect for it. But if your entire job is this transactional, hey, I have a good template.
Yeah.
Well, guess what? You're optimizing your workflow. And if we can repeat that, we can, because you're charging a premium for it.
Right.
You have to do something unique. So I like to bring it back to this amazing advice I got from a photographer back in the day, right? When I was running the agency. And it was, we were doing product shoots, like white on white product photography, right?
Yeah.
Which is still necessary, right? You do it, you create fun ways, whatever. And we couldn't get this like semi-transparent white plastic to shoot on a white background right? Yeah. With this one photographer. And so I reached out to another and asked, because he had done product. I was like, hey, do you have a tip or trick? Because we would share.
Yeah.
I mean, I found out this guy was just talking shit and doing all this. He's trying to steal my processes and this whole protectionist crap. Right.
Yeah.
And I went to another photographer friend of mine who was a pro, did, massive gigs. And he's just like, listen, if you're afraid that sharing your process is going to take away your job, you're not very good at your job.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right.
True.
And I took that to heart. And I think the same thing goes with how we're seeing, in this further automated AI induced creative world, where it's like, yeah, if you think that like a storyboard is going to take away your job and that anybody can come in and prompt it, well, guess what? Then you're reduced down to, you just have the ability to put it on paper.
Yeah.
It's not your ideas. You're not good at it. Right. Same thing as filmmakers. Great. So somebody could theoretically in 10 years time go on and create a feature film. Good for them.
Yeah. I think it's already happened actually, but it's not good.
No, but it's not good. This is my point, is anybody can go out with a camera. Look, we have them on iPhones everywhere. That doesn't mean it's good.
Yeah.
Right. And I think that's where we're going to be at, but this is the larger point, and why I'm actually a champion of human creativity. It puts more of the impetus on not being lazy in your creativity and owning that channel and saying, what is the next step? How do you become a critical thinker? How do you become a storyteller? How do you connect, in the case of professional creativity, a product to a person? And how do you elicit that emotion better and use these tools to make it easier on you, so you don't have to build the HR handbook? You don't have to pay $8,000 for somebody to storyboard something out when they're just being a tool.
Yeah.
Now, is that going to take away? There are going to be great storyboard artists that are
You're going to
just
get a lot of bad fan
always
mail
gonna
from
be great.
storyboard artists, man. You're really going in on
Yeah,
stuff.
yeah, yeah.
You
No,
know?
I mean, I say this because I've been there.
Yeah.
When anybody in professional creativity and creative direction has gone onto Google
Yeah.
and has been like, I need to find an image that represents the idea in my head and I need to do this.
Yeah.
And you spend 36, 48, 72 hours just finding images
Yeah.
that can represent it to somebody.
Yeah.
And you can very easily here at least create a semblance
Yeah.
of character in setting, relative, relative aesthetic
Yeah.
dialed in, and just do that and be like, hey, here's it, but now I want to hand it over to the great people.
Right.
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 Yeah,
Cool.
storyboard artists are gonna hate me, man.
I for the record, I love storyboard artists. So whatever Jake says.
Yeah. You're a friend of the storyboard artist. So am I.
Storyboard
And
union. I wanted to
dude, I think those aspects are really those are the people that it's going to be more convenient towards and are going to be able to express it.
Agreed.
I think that's the future, right? It's a blend, but I don't know, man. We'll see. But I also have to comment, man, slight change of subject. Every time I talk to you, you have a new amazing background. Like you have the forests, the high forests of Denver right now. Or the beach in Mexico, or the New Hampshire backgrounds with the paintings.
This is what taking time off you can travel around, dude. This is the. Although I tend to move around quite a bit. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I mean, to that, man, we talked right when you decided to take your break and get time out, and you were like, oh, I'm gonna take 6 months. You even projected at one point. And I clocked myself out and said, bullshit. And didn't tell you.
So did my wife.
Good for you.
So did my wife. Yeah.
And you were back at it in like 2 weeks.
72 hours. Yeah.
72 hours. No, but you love what you do, man. Like you love building things.
Yeah, absolutely.
Did you know that from a young age?
I love to write, and then I loved watching movies. So I put those two things were always kind of front and center. I would watch a movie and watch it again, and I'd watch it 3 times in a sitting. So, I always wanted to work in, film or TV or something. I was just enamored by that, and I think inherent in that is building. Right, you're constructing. And I got out of school and I just started interning and PAing on films, and I was like, this is my shit. This is what I like to do.
Yeah.
And I think, moving, when I started at camp and I thought we were doing content because that's what I've always done. And they're like, actually, we're going to do this live event. And I'm like, okay. And so, that is the next level of that building, right? Because the cool thing about the live event and, more the sort of activations, super creative, and you don't have anything to hide behind, right? You can't green screen it. You can't, every set has 3 walls, and then one wall is the camera, and you can just load all your crap behind it. And then when you do these live activations, you just kind of, you turn them on and you go. So to me, that was kind of the next level of building, right? All 4 walls have to be visible, interactive, able to be seen. You have nowhere to hide, and you don't get to go, cut. Yeah. I don't like what's happening here. We're just gonna time out. We're gonna run it back, So yeah, and then and then throughout that, I just realized how much I like to build teams and how I wrote this book about breaking into the film and TV industry, and there's an analogy in there about how to create a film or an activation or whatever, you have anywhere from 50 to 500 people coming together, and the art, the end product, right, the movie you see is the outcome of the art that happens through the process. So building those teams and creating that art, and then the end product is great, but the actual artistic piece of it is creating, and I think people don't really think about that. They're like, oh, the art is what I'm watching on screen. And it's like, no, the art is really the creation of what you're seeing on the screen, And so, and balancing, the production business, events or content or otherwise, it's this insane push and pull of creative and business, and so there's never enough money, there's never enough time. So as a producer, you're like, I mean, I always want to allow the creatives to make the best thing we possibly can make within the constraints of the budget and the time. And it's like, and those three things are they're always just pulling at each other so hard, and but to me, that's the challenge of managing that is actually, while stressful. I mean, we all say, like, producers, you become addicted to stress. You're like, I hate this, I love it, I hate it, I love, it's like, I hate the anxiety, but I actually kind of when I stop producing, then I miss it, and I'm addicted to the anxiety, So, it's an interesting industry. What do we say? We're like, you can have good, fast, and cheap. You can have two of the three, but not all three, right? It's like, it's no more true than in production. It's like, hey, we want this to be amazing. We don't really want to pay you a lot of money for it, and we need it right now. And you're like, pick two, You can have good and cheap. You can have good and cheap, but it's not going to be fast. You can have cheap and fast, but man, it is not going to be good,
Yeah, dude, absolutely. I love the point that you made about being addicted to the anxiety and the stress side. I think that's something
Not
so
healthy,
indicative
but...
of, well,
maybe
it's
is,
not. No, I don't think the immediate short-term aspects of it are healthy, but I think to go back to what you originally said about watching movies 3 times in a row and breaking it down. I did like stagecraft when I was in high school that got me into like loving that stuff, and worked as a PA on sets and did the whole thing. And I think what a lot of agency and professional creative folks have learned is that they love creative, right? They love building something. Same with startups, same with business owners, same with people that get into that. And it's like, no, it's stressful, because it just inherently is. There's no way to take away that stress, because when you believe in an execution more than the time allotted to get it done, and you don't just want to turn it off at the end of 8-hour day, well, then you've found something that you're actually passionate about doing for the most part. There's some people who are just addicted to outcome, but still, it's like, if I see nothing more toxic in this world than the mentality that has been pushed on people to not find a purpose for something to build. Right? Like, that their whole life is to just like go out and be in the world. And for some people, that's great. Have your existential dread. I'm fine with it. Right. But for me, I find my purpose in building things with people, communities, products I love building.
Yeah.
And my CTO co-founder, Sean, and I were geeking out on Saturday because we're going through, all these things on the product. And it's like, I woke up at 6:30 thinking about how to create a federated shortcut across our system that sounds dorky, but that's going to make the experience of this so much better. And I love it. And I wake up for it, and I feel good having a purpose. And I don't know, man. I think that's where the push and pull on professional creativity is really hard to explain to people, because there are those that just wake up in the morning and they think, oh, I don't want to produce anything.
Yeah. Or they don't know how. I mean, and I think there's a lot. I mean, I've pulled a lot of people throughout my career on like, man, we're not going to get it done. I'm like, well, we are. Like, there's going to be a day one of this shoot. We are going to launch this thing. Like, that's not take that off your plate. Like, it's a friggin' disaster. It's like, we're close to being over budget. We're running out of time. I'm like, it's all going to go, and it's going to happen. You know what I mean? And I will kill myself to make it good. Like,
Yeah, dude. Dude, you were talking startup life here. This is literally what
but it's like, well, I mean, again, I'm in production world, but it's like every production is a startup, right? I mean, you bring a whole team of people together most of whom have never worked together before. You go like, hey, we have this stuff on paper. We have this writing, Oh, let's start building sets. Oh, I don't like that. Let's model all these things. You know what I mean? Same thing with the event world. But like, the one thing leading teams, I've always, because there is, or launching a campaign. We are not going to get there, man. And you're like, oh no, we are going to get there. Like, this date is going to happen. Time is going to keep moving, and we are going to launch this thing. That's not an option. So just like, I don't care if you have to work for 24 hours. We're all going to do this together. You know what I mean? That's the art of it, and the outcome is the outcome of that artistic process that involves business, creative, the push and pull. And just to go back to way earlier, it's getting a little out of sync from budgets to expectations. And that's where I think there's going to have to be kind of a realignment of that, with brands expecting certain things. And there's always going to be upstart agencies who they'll just say, like, I'll do it. You want this crazy thing for 100K at the Super Bowl? I'll do it. But, and it's going to happen. Is it going to be good? TBD, right? It's like,
yeah.
But
no,
but I do love building, and then the launching of whatever it is, your content or your event, and then seeing people react to it and enjoy it, or if they hate it, whatever, just how they react to it, how they interact with it. That's very gratifying to me personally. I think to a lot of people, but it's like, oh, we've built this thing, like, high five. Now let's open the door, and people might come in, whatever, or most of the time it's like, oh shit, this is amazing,
Yeah.
So, but that's super gratifying. And when you build things, you have purpose. You have purpose, and what you were saying earlier. So,
no, that's exactly it. And I think that's, most people struggle to find that, and why the world of like agency, professional creativity, to be honest, trains people to be actually pretty damn good in the startup life. Because frankly, I was pulling all-nighters, when I was 18, trying to get my work done in this world, and just saying, no, there's a deadline. You got to work for, you got to work, you got to get it done. And I want it to look great. And it's a balance of, like, do I care about the thing that I'm producing? And if you don't care, fine. One, you have no place at every day, right? You have no place at any place I've ever worked at,
right?
Because that's not what we're building towards. Like, you want to find people that work, but there's I think professional creatives in particular are this, like, very niche group that have that know that they care about the work. And do they panic at a deadline? For sure.
Sure, everyone does.
Yeah, but they get shit done. Right.
And when you talk to young people who are like, I want to be an agency, I want to be in content, it's like, okay, cool. There's 1% of this is glamour, and that's what you see.
Yeah.
But when you're in it, it's again, you have to be okay with the pressure. You have to thrive under pressure. And I remember, like, all these kids who were coming out of film school when I was coming up in Boston and New York. They very disillusioned about what it was to make a film. Or how it happened, and where they would have to start in the totem pole. And it's like, I just made my thesis film. I'm like, cool. Well, the director needs, like, a coffee refresh over there. So if you could just, thesis film aside, like, shit has to happen here. You know what I mean? Like, let's go.
Yeah. No, truly though. It's like, hey, I studied this idea. I think there's a disillusion in the technology world too, because of this obsession with, like, what a founder looks like, the dropout from Stanford and Harvard that does this. Is like, dude, I have no doubt the amount of talent and intelligence that these people have, but you have zero operating experience. Let me guess why so many early startups founded with those types of people fail.
Right.
You're giving a 22-year-old the job to build a company and, like, experience that in real life. No, you have to fail at that and learn how to actually motivate people, and learn all the soft skills, and learn to navigate it, and learn that it's not a syllabus built for you that you get to just do. Do some of them succeed? Great. But if you keep over-indexing on young, inexperienced non-operators, hey, it doesn't take a genius to see that it's not their intelligence that's in the way. It's a total lack of experience.
Yeah.
Right?
Great.
And you got to deal with it. Anyways.
I think I read the key, the most, like, the most successful startups are founded by folks in their, like, late 30s, early 40s. That's where you have this, like, you're still able to take on a lot of risk, but you had the experience, and you failed and learned from it too a few times over, right? To be able to then take the things, put them together, and create a successful business.
Yeah. And realize, I think the lesson that you're talking about is, like, we're going to make the deadline one way or another. All right. And, like, and guess what we do? We just learn and we build, and we don't make the dumb mistakes that we've made before. Right.
Yeah.
And, it's not rocket science, man. It's just It's just tech.
I mean, you got to roll up your sleeves at some point.
Yeah. Hey. All right.
Actually, do it. Cool. Well, this is great.
Yeah, man. Really appreciate it.
Where is this living? Where are these videos going?
We're going to be pushing them out all over. But anyway, stay on the line. Will,
all right.
awesome, amazing. I'll talk to you soon, brother.
Talk to you soon.